Caitlin Clark got a little get back at Kelsey Plum.
She was taking a shot, could not help but to drag Caitlin Clark through the glass as she did it.
0 members of Team Clark were very present for that.
The WNBA is on a hot streak. They're finally turning.
What unfolded only moments ago has sent a pulse of shock through the entire WNBA landscape. Reporters are scrambling, executives are whispering, and fans are still frantically refreshing their feeds, trying to understand what they just witnessed. And somewhere tonight, Kelsey Plum is likely replaying the events over and over in her mind, realizing that this may be the moment her image and her influence changed forever. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just win today. She executed one of the most cold-blooded, calculated, and strategic dismantlings we've ever seen in women's basketball. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't impulsive. And it definitely wasn't accidental. It was surgical. It was a blueprint. A step-by-step demonstration of how to outplay, outthink, and outmaneuver someone who tried to damage your reputation publicly. What happened wasn't simply a loss for Plum. It was an erasure, a removal from the conversation, a silencing that didn't require a single insult, because Clark let the scoreboard do the speaking. As analysts trace every step of this collapse, one truth rises above all the noise. Kelsey Plum didn't just get outperformed. She got exposed. And as the details of this meltdown are now beginning to surface, the subtle gestures on the court, the body language between players, the moments cameras didn't catch, it becomes impossible to defend Plum's narrative any longer. If you walked into today thinking you still stood on her side, thinking that the story she spun over the last month still held weight, by the time you finish hearing what really happened, that loyalty may not survive.
Sore losers and you have sore winners, and Kelsey Plum is both.
We want to blow them out. We're a lot better than them.
We're watching for the league. We're really watching for Caitlin Clark. Everyone's going to be making more because of Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark is the one bringing in the numbers.
Well, there's one that...
Let's pull the camera back and rewind to where this saga truly began. Because what unfolded today wasn't born out of a single moment, a single game, or even a single season. It was the climax of something deeper. Something rooted in insecurity, quiet rivalry, and one player's attempt to dim the light of the brightest star the WNBA has ever seen. It traces back to the WNBA All-Star Weekend, a celebration that was supposed to unite, honor, and uplift women's basketball. A night designed to showcase the game at its peak. Instead, it became the stage for one of the most uncomfortable, jealousy-charged moments the sport has witnessed. The league at that time was rallying behind the "Pay Us What You Owe Us" movement, a powerful and justified demand from players who deserve far more compensation than they receive. The message itself was noble, necessary, unquestionable. But in the middle of that moment, when unity should have been the priority, Kelsey Plum made the decision that would come to define the trajectory of this rivalry. Sitting before a wall of cameras, microphones pointed at her like arrows, Plum took a breath, leaned forward, and delivered a statement that wasn't aimed at the league or the system or the owners. It was aimed, indirectly, strategically, at Caitlin Clark. She never said Clark's name. She didn't have to. It was the tone, the implication, the way she framed the conversation. Plum spoke not only about pay but about who should be getting paid, and why. She referenced players who had earned their position. She emphasized paying those who had been here, who had done the work, who had built this league. And to anyone watching closely, it was clear. This was not a speech about fairness. This was a warning shot. Because Clark, the phenomenon drawing unprecedented ratings, selling out arenas, and resetting every record the league tracks, was also a rookie. A 22-year-old who walked into the WNBA and instantly became its gravitational center. And that reality, for some, was unacceptable. That press conference wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. But it was surgical. A calculated attempt to remind the world that there is a hierarchy, and Clark, according to Plum, did not belong on top of it. In that moment, Kelsey Plum revealed her hand, and she may look back one day and call it the most costly decision of her career. Because what she didn't account for was what happens when you try to diminish someone who doesn't need a microphone to answer back.
That'll tell, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that.
Or her actually making comments about Caitlin Clark's team not being at this meeting for the CBA negotiation.
She dropped this carefully worded line claiming that none of the players on Team Clark were really involved. A clear job aimed at the league's pay negotiations and player activism. The nerve of it was unreal. She zeroed in on the very player who's generated more buzz, revenue, and visibility for the WNBA than anyone in its 28-year existence, and tried to spin her as self-centered and disconnected from her peers. The move was so transparent, so deliberate, and frankly so foolish that even people who don't follow basketball could see exactly what she was doing. What makes it even more aggravating is the reality of the situation. Clark wasn't even at the All-Star game. She was at home recovering and handling her own circumstances. She had zero responsibility to show up for performative displays just to prove she fans erupt over Clark's dominance supports player advocacy.
I think Caitlin Clark, during that whole thing about Team Clark, wasn't very present for that.
To me, I thought that was a little dig at Caitlin. A lot of people definitely thought so.
Plum, she was taking a shot at Caitlin Clark's situation involving the pay us what you...
To understand the magnitude of what came next, you have to understand who Caitlin Clark is within this ecosystem. She hasn't just entered the league, she has reshaped it. Almost single-handedly. She has rewritten what is possible for women's basketball. She has pulled in millions of brand new fans who had never watched a WNBA game before. She has elevated the profile of the sport to heights that analysts once laughed off as impossible. And for the first time in decades, she has made the WNBA not only relevant, but financially viable. Clark's arrival triggered a seismic shift in the business of basketball. Television ratings, once stagnant, suddenly exploded. Merchandise, jerseys, shirts, posters, flew off shelves so quickly that inventory couldn't keep up. Ticket prices began climbing, with arenas selling out hours, sometimes days, in advance. Even the coldest number in the business world tells the truth. Expansion fees jumped from $50 million to $250 million almost overnight, and insiders credit Clark as the catalyst. That is the kind of leverage that changes entire industries. And yet, in the face of numbers that would make any executive lose sleep, Kelsey Plum still questioned her dedication. Still implied she hadn't earned it. Still acted as if this generational talent owed something to a system that has needed her more than she will ever need them. The disrespect was astonishing. But what followed was poetic. Because the backlash was instant, and it was merciless. Just look at Sabrina Ionescu's face in that moment, sitting beside Plum at that press conference. The micro-expression said everything. Shock, discomfort, and a dawning realization that something irreversible had just been said aloud. And the analysts didn't hold back either. Stacey King, a seasoned voice in basketball commentary, didn't sugarcoat a thing. He warned that publicly challenging the league's golden ticket isn't just reckless. It's business suicide. Because you don't take a shot at the player who is putting food on everyone's table. The math, the economics, the cultural impact, all of it tells the same story. Caitlin Clark is the league's most valuable bargaining chip in salary negotiations. She is the reason sponsorship numbers are rising. She is the reason expansion is even possible. She is the reason this conversation right now exists. And yet somehow, Kelsey Plum made the decision to go after her. But here is where the story takes a turn, because Clark didn't answer with a microphone or a tweet or a podium. She answered where legends answer. On the court.
But to say that Caitlin Clark didn't join in on the T-shirt discussion.
This week they wore T-shirts saying, making a statement, you better pay us. But instead of just leaving it at that, Kelsey Plum for L.A. had to take a dig at Caitlin Clark. Here she is.
The T-shirt, just United Front was determined this morning that we had a meeting for, and not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present.
Caitlin Clark operates on a level most people can barely comprehend. A tactician in a game where everyone else is still playing checkers. She doesn't react impulsively, she doesn't chase headlines, and she certainly doesn't let petty conflicts dictate her moves. Instead, she plays the long game, letting silence and strategy speak louder than words ever could. While the noise swirled around her, jabs, insinuations, and social media distractions, Clark remained deliberate and patient. She allowed the situation to unfold, observing, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to make her move. And when that moment arrived, it struck with the force of a wrecking ball. Not long after the controversy with Kelsey Plum erupted, Clark announced a monumental global partnership with Nike. This wasn't just a commercial deal. It was a statement. Major brands weren't just interested. They were lining up, competing, and willing to invest millions to be associated with her name. While Plum appeared preoccupied with undermining Clark, Clark was quietly building an empire, expanding her reach, and cementing her position as the face of the league. The defining moment came when Clark noticed Plum posting images from a Nike event. A subtle move, yet laden with implications, given that Plum is officially signed with Nike's rival, Under Armour. It was at that precise moment that Clark delivered a flawlessly timed, razor-sharp comment on social media. It was short, precise, and devastating in its impact. "Thanks for the Nike ad." In a few words, she turned the tables. Clark's understated remark didn't just respond. It dominated the narrative, sending fans and media into a frenzy and reinforcing the reality that her influence extends far beyond the court. While some players struggle for visibility and recognition, Clark has proven that true power doesn't need noise. It creates it. Her reach is enormous. Every move she makes, every post, every headline, every endorsement becomes a signal that cannot be ignored. And in this moment, the world saw clearly. The player who had been accused of selfishness and disengagement had outmaneuvered her critics without ever needing to raise her voice. Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She is an institution unto herself. Brands are lining up with open checkbooks, eager to associate with her, and she is pulling in well over 7 figures through endorsements alone. While some longtime players are still fighting to be seen, the corporate world has already recognized what critics refuse to admit. Clark isn't just the future of the WNBA. She is the present. She is the engine driving the league's resurgence, the reason women's basketball is finally earning the respect and financial backing it has long deserved. Since her perfectly timed Instagram comment, Kelsey Plum has gone silent. The realization seems to have dawned that she challenged someone operating on an entirely different plane. The player once framed as selfish or disengaged has, in fact, demonstrated the rarest of abilities. Real influence that requires no noise, no theatrics. It simply exists and lets outcomes speak for themselves. Even the smallest social media remark from Clark becomes headline news. Plum's attempts to maintain relevance, by comparison, barely register. But this is about far more than a personal rivalry. It reflects a broader, ongoing struggle within the WNBA. A subtle, yet persistent effort by certain veterans to manage, limit, or slow Clark's meteoric rise. And that effort is failing spectacularly. Before Clark's arrival, the league faced real challenges. Viewership was low. Media coverage was scarce. Expansion fees were modest. And arenas too often felt half-empty. Ticket sales were sluggish. And profitability was a distant dream. But then Clark arrived and everything changed. Ratings soared. Jerseys disappeared from shelves almost as soon as they were stocked. Ticket prices climbed steadily. Media deals ballooned. Expansion fees skyrocketed. Nearly every positive shift in the league can be traced directly back to her presence. And yet, instead of embracing this growth, some veterans responded with thinly veiled jealousy, cautious resistance, or outright criticism. What they failed to recognize is a simple truth. Clark's success elevates everyone. Higher viewership means higher salaries, better resources, and more leverage for every player in the league. She is the catalyst they have been searching for. The spark that makes progress possible. Through it all, Clark has proven she is more than a phenomenal athlete. She is a strategist, a leader who understands power, timing, and the long game. She doesn't chase drama. She converts criticism into momentum. Fans notice. Analysts notice. The numbers prove it. And in that process, history is being written, in real time before our eyes.